In the sun-scorched basin of the Rio Grande, where mesquite trees whisper secrets and the wind carries the scent of gunpowder, two armies met not just to fight, but to define the fate of the West. This is the story of Valverde, New Mexico, 1862. Subscribe now to follow every twist, betrayal, and bullet. Born in Louisiana in 1816, Henry Sibley was the kind of man who could sell you a dream and forget to include the receipt. Raised in a genteel Southern family, he was sent to West Point, where he graduated in 1838, just in time to fight in the Mexican-American War. He was brave, yes, but also broke, constantly. His post-war ventures into business were a parade of financial disasters, failed land deals, unpaid debts, and a reputation for being more interested in bourbon than bookkeeping. He married Charlotte Sibley, a woman of patience and iron will, who spent much of their marriage trying to keep Henry sober and solvent. Spoiler, she failed on both fronts. Sibley's military career was respectable, but unremarkable, until the Civil War gave him a stage. He hatched a plan so grand it could have been written by Jules Verne: march through New Mexico, seize Fort Union, and open a Confederate corridor to California. Why? Because California had gold, ports, and prestige, and because Sibley believed the locals would welcome him with open arms and mint juleps. "We shall take the territory with minimal resistance," he told his officers. Spoiler alert, the locals were not interested in mint juleps. They preferred Union blue. Born in Kentucky in 1817, Canby was the human embodiment of a ledger book, precise, calm, and allergic to drama. He also graduated from West Point just a year after Sibley and served alongside him in the Mexican-American War. But where Sibley saw glory, Canby saw logistics. Where Sibley drank, Canby planned. Where Sibley charged, Canby calculated. Canby married Louisa Hawkins, a woman as reserved and intelligent as her husband. Their marriage was a quiet partnership, more chess than romance, but deeply loyal. Canby's military career was built on discipline. He was known for keeping his cool even when bullets flew like mosquitoes. By 1862, he commanded Fort Craig in New Mexico, a dusty outpost with 3,000 men, regulars, volunteers, and New Mexican militia. His troops were undertrained but fiercely loyal, and Canby knew one thing: Fort Craig was a fortress. Leaving it to chase Sibley would be like abandoning your umbrella in a thunderstorm. "Let the enemy come," Canby said. "We'll greet them with discipline, not bravado." Sibley's Army of New Mexico, 2,590 strong, marched north from El Paso with dreams of conquest and wagons full of hope, and not much else. The terrain was brutal: jagged mesas, dry riverbeds, and wind that could sandpaper your soul. Supplies ran low, morale dipped, horses limped. And Sibley, ever the optimist, kept promising that Fort Craig would fall like a house of cards. But Canby refused to play. He stayed inside Fort Craig, which was built in 1854 to protect settlers and trade routes. The fort sprawled across the desert like a sleeping beast. Stone walls, artillery batteries, and enough firepower to make any frontal assault suicidal. Sibley couldn't afford a siege. His men were hungry, his wagons were empty, and his whiskey was running out. So he tried something clever. Bypass Fort Craig and cross the Rio Grande at Valverde Ford, hoping to cut off Canby's supply lines and force him into open battle. New Mexico Territory, February 21st, 1862, 9 a.m. The sun rises like a flaming coin over the Rio Grande. The air is dry enough to crack lips, and the wind kicks up dust like a curtain call. The battlefield? A dried-out riverbed flanked by cactus thickets, mesquite tangles, and sand so fine it could exfoliate a cannonball. This is Valverde Ford, a shallow crossing point on the Rio Grande, just north of Fort Craig. It's the kind of place where rattlesnakes sunbathe and horses lose their patience. The Confederates, led by General Henry Sibley, who, spoiler alert, is nowhere near the action, are trying to cross here to flank the Union forces and cut off their supply lines. Colonel Edward Canby, the Union commander, wakes up that morning with a bad feeling and a good plan. He realizes Sibley's troops are trying to sneak past Fort Craig and cross the river at Valverde. So what does he do? He sends a force of infantry, cavalry, and artillery to block the crossing. Smart move. The Union troops dig in on the west bank, cannons positioned, muskets loaded, and nerves twitching. At exactly 9 a.m., the desert explodes. Union artillery opens fire, sending shells screaming across the riverbed. Confederate troops scramble for cover, their boots kicking up clouds of dust. The air smells like sulfur and sweat. Then comes the cavalry. Confederate horsemen charging through the sand like a stampede of angry ghosts. The terrain is brutal. Dry gullies, thorny brush, and visibility so poor you could lose your own mustache in the haze. Enter Colonel Thomas Greene, a man with the tactical instincts of a fox and the courage of a man who's clearly read too many epic poems. With Sibley out of commission, more on that in a moment, Greene takes command and leads a bold flanking maneuver. He rallies his men and charges the Union line with sabers drawn and boots pounding. The Union line wavers. Dust blinds the defenders. And then, boom, Greene's men punch through like a battering ram made of Texans. On the Union side, Captain Alexander McCrae is manning the artillery like a maestro. His battery is the backbone of the defense, and he's not about to let it fall. "Hold the line," McCrae shouts, his voice cutting through the chaos. Moments later, a Confederate bullet finds him. He falls beside his cannon and his battery is overrun. 6 Union cannons are captured. The tide turns. Meanwhile, General Sibley is not present. He's reportedly ill, some say dysentery, others whisper whiskey. Either way, he's in his tent, horizontal, and not exactly commanding. The battle rages without him, and Greene becomes the de facto leader. Greene's aggressive tactics, fast cavalry charges, flanking maneuvers, and relentless pressure are what win the day. But it's a costly win. Canby's mistake? He underestimated the Confederates' grit. He thought they'd melt in the desert heat. They didn't. Sibley's mistake? He thought the locals would rise up in support. They didn't. In fact, many joined the Union militia. "We were promised a parade," one Confederate soldier wrote. "We got a funeral." The Union suffered 432 casualties. The Confederates lost 187. Technically, it's a Confederate victory, but it's the kind of win that feels like losing slower. Sibley's army, battered and bruised, limps north to Santa Fe, then to Fort Union, and then boom, they're crushed at the Battle of Glorieta Pass in March. The dream of a Confederate corridor to California? Dead in the dust. Canby, ever the stoic, remains in command. He's later promoted to general and continues his career with dignity and discipline. Sibley, he's reassigned. His reputation tarnished. He fades into obscurity, writing bitter reflections in his journal. "The desert swallowed our dreams," Sibley wrote years later. "And I too was buried in its silence." Valverde wasn't just a battle. It was a mirage. A tale of ambition outpaced by reality, of brave men caught in the gears of history. Subscribe to our channel for more gripping Civil War stories, where every cannon blast echoes through